Hey, folks. Today we have a leader with over 28 years' experience in the automotive industry, a coach, fixed operations director, and I love being able to say this, fixed operations director and mechanic. Okay, folks, this is what we've been looking for. We keep giving you leaders on the show every single time, but the cool thing is when they were mechanics first, they give us a much better context, don't they? Jeremy Stevens, ladies and gentlemen. Jeremy, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk to you. I love to talk about the beginnings and stuff like that because for me it doesn't seem like it was that far away. But as I look at myself in this video, it's like, man, I've aged. I'm
It's
hoping you
been
had.
some time. Hey, what's the mechanic meme that goes around the internet? Oh, he's got 25 years experience in 10 years, but look at him, he's got gray hair and he's 25. Yeah, so yeah, it's the gray comes if you're in this industry, especially if you turn wrenches. Folks, let's get to the very beginning. Let's go back to the very beginning because you were a mechanic. That means you had to start as a mechanic. So what got you to become a mechanic in the first place?
Really, it's an interesting story. So I grew up in this little small town in North Carolina, and I blame a lot on my older brother because he made it hard for me growing up because he was a straight A student, and then I come along. And I messed my parents up so bad because I cannot make an A or B to save my life. And so I went through school, and of course, my brother passed the SAT and went to college. And here I come, in the 12th grade, and everybody's asking you that same question: what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And I had no idea. I just didn't want to go to school anymore. I was done with school. I just wanted to go work. And my parents made me pick some type of college, and I like cars, but I didn't love cars. I mean, I was able. I'm mechanically inclined, so I was like, let me just do this. It's a year long program. I can suffer through 1 year, and I actually made straight A's in automotive. I graduated with honors in this 1 year certificate, which blew my mind. And while I was doing school, I got my first job at a little full service gas station in the hometown. So the full service gas station was when that car rang over the little rubber hose in there, it rang a bell, and my
Ding!
job was to run out there and pump gas. And I changed oil, did tires, brakes, and just really fell in love with that. And I got to learn customer experience right there because if you didn't do the little washing the windows right, the older ladies will point out and fuss at you because you didn't clean it right and all sorts of stuff. So I got a lot of good experience in the 2 years I worked at that little service station.
Yeah, it makes those that first year, right, get you no matter how we get in, no matter however we get into the trade and we start slinging wrenches, that it's always an interesting story as to why, sometimes family is encouraging and sometimes family is more, you need a job. You need a job today. We need to get you out of the house and you need a job today. Right. And sometimes it's that push that we really need. But the cool thing is when we get those first jobs and I think technically my first job was doing lawns for my grandfather, and at the time they had a motel, so doing a lawn meant like 8 hours worth of work, not like pushing a lawnmower for an hour around the yard. It was like 8 hours of work to do the whole entire yard, and that's including using like a 48-inch deck on a tractor and the whole 9 yards. So once started working, it's like, oh, I gotta work, right? I got to work. And now I look at it as a 40-year-old man. I'm looking back at going, sometimes I go to work to get away from the chores my wife needs me to do because the chores are freaking harder than the work that I got to do at work. So
It
it's
definitely
interesting. So you were learning customer experience and the ding as it came in. What was that first year or so like? Was it a lot like what we see on the internet where, it was digging ditches and cleaning shit out and stuff like that or what?
so I was really lucky with the two owners of this service station. It's weird. The job interview process was the owner sat in a 5 gallon bucket and it said, "Hey, can you put the rear shocks in this car? And I'm gonna watch you see if you can do it or not." And that was my job interview, and that was the first time I ever worked underneath a lift. Because we always, grow up, we always fixing up cars, so I knew how to do it. But on a lift, I was like, I don't know how to do it on a lift, but I did it, and luckily didn't kill myself. But that was my job interview. So I lucked up with him because he saw that I was a hard worker. So he definitely gave me more responsibility, and it was I was just that guy that was just willing to do whatever it took. You know, if I cleaned bathrooms, I was fine with it.
Mm.
Um,
I'm
you
not
know,
sure HR would let anybody get away with that kind of interview question these
oh
days, but
yeah,
that's a damn good interview question.
yeah,
I gotta remember that. Next time a service manager asks me, what do we ask during interviews? That can they change rear shock on a car right off the rip?
yeah,
Okay.
that was right. And I was like, yeah, and it worked. But it was a great experience. So I learned a lot. It was a great training ground because from there. So imagine going to a little 3 bay full service gas station to the big Chevrolet store in Raleigh. It was
Hmm.
Bobby Murray Chevrolet, and they probably had 60 technicians, 3 separate shops. It was huge. And I'm going in there, and I remember my first day I got ripped by a senior technician because I asked the wrong question and stuff like that. So this was when the day people could cuss you out, and there was no HR. It was,
Hmm.
pretty much violent at some point. You could just say what you want to and put your hands on people,
Yeah.
but
I,
it's like
I,
you
I,
know, that's
I
where
miss
people.
those days, to be honest. You know what? I kind of miss those days because, there is a line that I think that sometimes got crossed, and I think that's why HR got involved.
Yeah,
But at the
we
same
created
time,
it.
I miss when the older men who've been around the block a time or two, who know the difference between a question and some smart ass remark, and they'd cuss you out for it, and then you'd learn something. There's and I can't speak for women in the trade because I don't know that many. I've only had the luxury of having a conversation with a couple, so I don't know every female's experience in the trade, but I'm got a pretty good idea of the male side of the trade, that the ones that learned the best, especially the ones that have come on the show and shared their stories, the ones that had that somewhere between uncle, dad, and not quite best friend, but that person that represented their mentor, somebody who'd be more than willing to kick their ass with a frozen boot, cuss them out when they and hold them accountable, but at the same time spend the time, energy, and effort to help them be better, and not only be better mechanics or become a better mechanic or become a mechanic, but become a better human being as a man. And I would love to hear from anybody in the audience that's listening that's a female in the industry and has had a female mentor, to see if anything's been done differently in that regard. If it's the same, it's not necessarily a male perspective, it's just the perspective of somebody who knows how to teach someone to work hard. So interesting to get cussed out on your first day, as it were. So
It
what?
did, but it needed to happen, because what it did,
Fair.
it actually drove me to be self-efficient. It's like that's when I learned the manuals basically, and they were books. So from that point, I stopped asking questions and I started learning myself. And what it did, it gave me that advantage of now I know all the electrical stuff because this was right before OBD2 was coming in, and
Hmm.
nobody wanted to learn it but me. And what that did, that gave me this huge leverage with these older technicians because they didn't want to program key. This was when key fobs first came out and stuff like
Hmm.
that. So I
96, 97, 98, somewhere in there, right?
yeah. So it gave me that edge where, I was seen valuable to the older guys, which that's what I needed because they showed me tricks of the trade. And everybody says there's no tricks, but there's some things that somebody that's been doing it for 20, 30 years can show you so it don't take you 20, 30 years to figure that out. So it actually, I look back and I'm glad it happened because it made me step it up a little bit and kind
Hmm.
of prove yourself into the ranks basically, and it just slingshotted my growth from there.
Well, those tips and tricks, as it were, those are much more than just the tips or tricks. I find that those are the things that they utilize to teach you that ways to there are ways and means to work around certain things, right? To teach you to not just read the steps and follow the steps, but to learn to read between the lines, when it's okay to try and find another way, when it's not okay to find another way, but to always be looking for a way to be more efficient or to be safer or to do something at a higher quality or some way. But those tips and tricks are those are the keys that allow us to unlock, okay, 10 years ago I learned from this old timer this, and it was on this section. This is very similar to that. Why don't I
Yeah.
look at it the same way where, somewhere around step D is a whole bunch of stuff that I really don't need to do, but I
Yeah.
still get the kind of result that I'm looking for. So let me try it. That let me try it is what those tips and tricks I think really teach
Yeah.
us.
And I still remember in my early 20s, I was glad I got to work beside a transmission guy. His name was Cleve Williams. I still remember him. And Chevrolets had these flywheel bolts that were so shallow that if you weren't careful, you strip them out.
Mm-hmm.
And I did two of them. And I was like, son of a gun. And I'm sitting there fighting with it. You do the old school vice grips, whatever it takes. And he pushed me out of the way and had an air hammer with a chisel and popped them off within seconds. And I was sitting there fighting, and it's like if he hadn't showed me that, I'd still be working on that today. But it's just those little things, how to use the tools properly, or it's like, hey, this tool will work on that part of it. So it was pretty cool to experience that side of it.
It's again, it's those tips and tricks that you would never think to do it because of a lot of different reasons, perhaps. Right? It's just not something that you necessarily would think of, and it's not even necessarily thinking outside the box because some of those things you would just never think to do. And I liken it to part of social media, the things that I learn on TikTok about something completely random, like taking a small tortilla, putting some cheese and ham in it, folding it in half, and putting it in a toaster. I don't need a panini press. I've got a toaster. I can make myself a quasi quesadilla in a toaster. I would never think to do that. But now that I know that, that's one of those things where, with your impact hammer, now I know in certain circumstances, let me. Is it appropriate? Is it okay? Is it safe for me to use the impact hammer in this circumstance? Yes. But it's not even necessarily the act of him using it on those torque converter bolts. It's the fact that he's used it.
Now,
It's another reason for you to go, let me think about what situation am I in? How do I utilize some of the basics that I have learned across all these years to get me through the next steps without banging my head against a wall? Right? So,
wasting a lot of time.
right. So it sounds like your first couple of years, you learned about customer service. You learned a little bit of perhaps what to do, what not to do. You learned about it sounds like you had somebody who's willing to mentor you a little bit. So talk us through that. What's gone from then, several years wrenching. If I understand, you probably had well over a decade properly professionally wrenching before you started changing to leadership. I think we both came off the bench effectively around the same time, somewhere between 2010 2011 ish, and then you're getting into leadership. So walk us through that. What was the perhaps key catalyst to get you off the bench and into leadership?
So with when I was a technician, I've always had this. There was something inside. I can't explain, but there was something inside me that there was something more there. And I was at a point I was fine retiring as a technician, but I knew at some point I wasn't going to be able to keep up the capacity I was in my 30s, and that was always on the back of my mind. Um, and then, when I left that Chevy store, I went to another Chevy store, and I was there for 3 or 4 years. And the used car manager there, him and I connected. We want to take care of customers the same way. We really cared, and he started his own dealership, and I went with him when he started his new Chevrolet dealership. And it was a very small shop, and I kind of assumed the role of a shop foreman without the title. And I would dispatch work. I would just kind of help out any way I could. If there was upset customers, I was fine. I could talk with them. So I started advancing on that side. So the owner saw something that I didn't see at the point. Um, and he asked me, would I want to be a service manager? And I kind of told him no, because you look at those managers, they get beat up quite often. They're like a punching bag all over the place, and they really they're in control of a lot, but they really don't have a control in. They're a byproduct of a lot of stuff. but I was always intrigued and I felt like I could make a difference. So eventually I accepted that spot. So I was a technician on Friday and a service manager on Monday, not knowing what the heck I was doing. I made a lot of mistakes. And then it was a point where I kind of discovered leadership, not looking for it, but just kind of stumbled into it. I tell people you always have this junk drawer in your kitchen that needs to be cleaned up, and the dealership always has a closet that's all nasty. And I remember there was this one closet I've had enough. I was like, I'm gonna clean it all out because I had a whole bunch of old old stuff that was like the stickers on the cars and stuff like that. So I cleaned it
Hmm.
out, and at the very bottom of it, I found this big old box of VHS tapes, and it was John Maxwell 21 Laws of Leadership. And I looked at it, I was like, what the heck is this laws of leadership? It didn't even make sense to me. And at the time, I didn't have a VHS player because DVDs were popular at that point. So I did the next free thing is I YouTubed John Maxwell and I watched his leadership thing and it started clicking. I was like, this is because before I thought you had to be born a leader. And that's why I never really sought after a leadership position because I thought
Hmm.
either you had it or you didn't. But then I discovered it can be taught. Um,
Hmm.
and and from that point, I was hooked. I really self development, and then just your circle around you. It's like, what can you do to help that person? And then I started helping the next person, and then it just rippled up. The owner saw that. He saw the department I was running. It started becoming a winning team. We started moving. We became great in CSI. We became great in Express Lane. I was at a Chrysler dealership at this time, so a lot of the eyes from Chrysler was watching the store, and it just pretty much just grew into that. And I was made service and parts director over that Chrysler store, and a couple years later, he made me the fixed ops director of the whole entire group, and it just kept on moving and moving, and just and that's one thing I love about the dealership. Everybody says, "Why do you like working at the dealership?" I say, "It's the great equalizer." Because you take somebody like me that barely passed high school. I'm the product of the teachers passing you through class. My algebra teacher, I need to thank her. If I could find her, I would thank her because I was the only senior in this class full of freshmen, and I didn't pass. I didn't pass it. She passed me.
Hmm.
Um, but the dealership is the great equalizer. It's like if you got good character and hard work, you can win, you can succeed in a dealership setting.
I think that exemplifies the dealership setting. If you've got good character and drive, you can succeed.
Yep.
But I think the thing that you need the most working in automotive is drive. You can fix everything else. You can fix everything else. It doesn't matter what a sales, service part, it doesn't matter. You can fix everything else. But if you don't have drive, you are not going to get through this industry because there are too many challenges in our day. Doesn't matter what department or whether you're inside the dealership, outside the dealership, independent, vendor, it doesn't matter. There are too many hardships, too many challenges every single day that we have to go through for it to be sunshines and lollipops all the time. And the only thing that's going to get you through that is drive. 100% drive. How can we best serve our teams and how can we best serve our customers? If that is the only thing on your mind 24/7 and you've got the drive to do it, you are going to be successful in this business.
Yeah.
Bar none.
Definitely will. And just the people around you. A lot of times when you invest in the people around you, when that promotion comes around, your peers are going to point out the person that needs to be promoted because they value you and all the hard work you've done for them. Um, but it's pretty cool to look back now because when I started this journey, I had no idea I would be ended up in Florida at this point. Um, but it's also cool to look back and see how all the hardships and all the stuff that you had to go to kind of redirected you and where you are now because it didn't make sense going through that, but it
Mm-hmm.
does it does now, especially as a technician. Sometimes I had to look back. It's like, man, I was a technician a couple years ago, and
Mm-hmm.
now I'm trusted to lead people, and that's a huge responsibility as I affect people's lives, not just their professional life, but it can ripple effect in their personal life, and that's what it scares me, but it also excites me because if I could make a difference in one employee's life, then that could ripple effect into their family and just create this ripple effect and alter people's family tree, really.
Exactly. That is functionally one of the catalysts to me with the phrase that I say at the end of every show. Negative pushes positive pulls. When we are leading teams of people, you have to remember that those people, they have two environments. They have their work environment and they have their home environment. If the work environment that they're in isn't conducive with positive energy, and you can talk about all the cliches and all of the sunshines and lollipops that go along with positive energies, but realistically speaking, a positive workplace environment will change somebody's life because it means they're valued, appreciated, they're paid properly. And I don't, I've had a whole discussion with a friend of mine literally earlier this morning, but paid properly, treated well. They're part of a team. They're part of something bigger than themselves. When they go home at night, no matter how many hours they put in a day, no matter how much effort they put in a day, they go home with a sense of pride of what they've put in, the effort that they've put in, and the results of their hard work, that they're appreciated. They go home and they take that positive energy home, and now you litter the home with all of that positive energy. Positive energy begets positive energy, and you get positive energy being given back to them at home. They get recharged at home, they come back. Guess what? They've got even more energy to do it tomorrow at the working environment, and it becomes a cycle of positive energy. You have somebody who is nonstop negative on your team. They negative spreads far faster than positive does. So you got to get rid of the negative because the negative pushes people away. They isolate themselves. You get all of the mental that goes along with the negative energy. It prevents production. It prevents teamwork. It prevents communication. All of those things that you get people who want to be on the bus, who want to be part of the positive, and then you get somebody who's driving the bus, who's equally as or more positive, who is providing that support in that working environment. There's nobody stopping that, right? There's nobody stopping that.
Yeah, it definitely makes a huge impact when you're happy at your workplace and then you bring that home. My fear has always been, and it takes a lot of intentionality to create a positive culture at work because in the service side you just hear the negative because my car's broke. You've altered my life. I can't pick up my kids. So you kind of have to have a little filter right there and spin it positive. But you also got to create an environment where your employees can actually talk to upper management. And I made a huge error last week. I screwed something up, and I'll go ahead and we'll confess this. This is my confession time. Are you like the guy on the other side of the booth? So I created some levels of leadership. So because I never want to tell people how to do their job because I'm not doing it anymore. I need them to tell me how to do their job, and they need to tell me what to do because that's gives me guidance. Because I'm a big vision guy. I like to think into the future and what we can do. And I didn't. I set up a process, but I didn't follow through with it and make sure it was being followed. So at the end, it's all my fault. It falls on leadership every time. But what it did, it created some negative views on my team, and so we had to fix it real fast. And I had to give them a chance that these employees can express their concern. And what happened was I thought the team under me were doing it and they won't. And that was my fault because I didn't check into it. And it created some negative energy on our side. But the cool thing is if you've done that, you can fix it real fast. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you get them together where they can vent their frustrations out and let's create some action plans to get it solved. And you can definitely spin it back on there because it reminded me I'll never forget my oldest son, TC. Um, we were at a soccer game one time. We drove like 2 hours away, and I remember it because I remember this day because our cat hitched a ride underneath the van. So we got 2 hours away, and the cat comes out from under the van, and it's like, oh, cat's here. And I remember us sitting in the stadium because we had the cat. All the boys, I got 5 boys, so all the boys were with us at this thing and my oldest son playing soccer. He played travel soccer and college soccer. He was very good at soccer. And I remember this one play, and it's weird how you remember this stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
this one play, he was a left side defense, so he got the ball on the left side and started dribbling up the field, and two forwards were wide open, and he wouldn't pass it. And I did the things that parents don't supposed to do after the game. You talk to your kid and it's like, why didn't you pass the ball at this point? It's like you had two guys open, you could have scored, it'd have been awesome, but you wanted to keep the ball for yourself. So I was kind of blaming him for being a ball hawk. And I never forget what he told me. He says, Dad, you look at the field at a totally different angle than I am. You're in the stands and you see the whole field. I'm a player on the field. And I don't know if you noticed this, but I had three guys trying to steal the ball from me. And that was my one concern, is to not lose the ball. And I was like, oh, that's a great point. And I never forgot it. So I try to implement that in the professional realm, in the professional world, that I need that feedback from the guys on the field and not from my seat, because I see it from totally different, and it works both ways too. We could help and coach. It's like, hey, in this situation, you could do that, but I could approach it differently. I could ask different questions. It's like, hey, explain that play on that side. What is there anything you could have done? Is there anything I can do to help you? Do I need to help you? Do I need to find somebody to teach you some footwork or whatever? So I kind of apply that to a professional side with the technicians or the service advisors or who else. What are you seeing while you're out on the field playing that I don't see? What do I need to do to help you to 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 make you better? What tools, resources? Do I need to do some training? Do I need to back off? Do I need to help you? It's more of that coaching side of it. Um, so definitely on the employee side, give them a way that they can funnel that information to you and keep that open line of communication, because a lot of people, it's easier to lead people without the leadership or the manager title. So when you become manager, you have to work very hard in keeping that connection open, because they're sometimes they can be hesitant to voice their concerns to the boss
Mm-hmm.
or whoever. Um,
And fear really drives a lot of those conversations, right? Or lack of conversations, because if I tell them I screwed up, or I'm telling them I'm struggling, I'm going to lose my job, or they're going to think differently of me, or whatever the case may be. And those fears are real, because in a lot of circumstances, and I've heard it through my own coaching, hear it all the time. It's like, if I tell them I'm not getting what I need, they're just going to find somebody who can do it without them. It's like, well, I understand that is a potential. If those are the kind of people you're working for, do you really want to work for them anyway?
uh,
That's kind of comment number one. And if you're not willing to do that, and you are working for an awesome leader who's willing to do that, you're selling yourself short. So either way, it's a good thing to ask, because if you don't ask, you're shorting yourself. If you do ask and you get it, you could be winning. But if you do ask and they don't want to provide it, you need to find a better place to work for, right? Those are kind of it doesn't matter what position we're talking about. And I really like that. That's a bar drop. That's a mic drop for sure. I'm a player on the field with a certain perspective. You're a coach off the field with a 30,000 foot view. I can only see so much. That's where the coach comes into play. Well, these are the things that were occurring. It looked like your head was up, but you weren't. Maybe you weren't. In soccer, great word in soccer is scanning. Is if you're not scanning around you, yes, you had three players on you, but they were ahead of you. You had a player, your goalie had come up, or the center mid had come up and come across, and they were open for a sideways pass in the clear. That's where that perhaps could have been the moment where scanning, being more aware, being more open of what's around you and what's at your disposal. You had the resources, not just ahead of you, but to your side, and that's or to behind you. And that's the thing that as mechanics, I think we don't see, is that we don't always have to look to our service manager or the shop foreman for help. We don't always have to just talk to the baymate to our left or to our right. There's an entire shop full of people. More importantly, there's an entire shop wealth of information and experience that we can talk to and we communicate with, and building those bonds. It's like maybe they had that tidbit about how to save time on the torque converter, right? Maybe that's the thing that we have to cultivate. But in order to have those open lines of communication, like you said, if you don't have those open lines of communication with your service manager, with your shop foreman, with your peers, you're not going to be able to get those things. Again, positive energy,
yeah.
right? So I appreciate this story. Thank you very much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Now, to that end, that's probably part of the reason why you got into coaching yourself. and I'm sure you've got lots of stories to that end. But given the timeline and given the time frame, what's one story that you can share that perhaps a mechanic can pull something from, something perhaps obscure that might have never been told before?
Oh my goodness, you put me on the spot now because there's so many different stories, um, and and a lot of it is really one thing that we got to figure out with the technicians is everybody just looks at them as producers, um, and they are producers, but they also can have a bad day
Mm-hmm.
where um, because we did have this one technician, great technician, is always productive. Um, but then there's that day that he gets a recheck, or it happens. It's going to happen, and then what happens is he's so frustrated about it, he tries to fix it and makes it worse, kind of thing. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of those times, I remember this one technician that was like that, and I pulled him to the side and just talked to him and found out that he just had a lot of stuff going on at home. And the business side of me is like, the old school side of this side, just suck it up and deal with it because we got work to do. But
Mm-hmm.
you kind of got to take yourself out of that, and it's like, what's the best scenario? And that scenario was just take a day off. We'll figure it out. Just to clear your head and figure things out and reset, and then come back tomorrow. Because you know how when you're a technician, you can do but so much, and that's like nothing works. But if you go leave it for an hour or so, or take a long lunch break, it just magically comes together when you come back, kind of thing.
Why
Um,
I teach breathing? It's why part of coaching you teach breathing. It's insane, and I won't go into detail because I've done entire programs on it. But those moments of clarity don't come until you're actually clear, right? And it doesn't matter what you need. The individual always needs something different. Everybody needs something a little bit differently for one reason or other. And usually it comes down to breathing, whether it's going outside, you know, old school gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen in the trade will go out for a smoke. It's
oh,
breathing. May not be great air, but it's breathing nonetheless. But it's not thinking about the problem at hand. You have bashed your face against something for whatever reason, making mistakes, this, that, the other, for whatever reason. Take a minute, get your brain off that thing, go do something completely trivial, right? Go for a walk, go whatever, go, like you said, go take a long lunch, do something to get your mind off the task you're actively doing so that when you come back to it, you're not coming back to the same spot you left. You have to go, okay, let's look at this big picture. What are the things that I've done? What are the things that I haven't done? Da, 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 da. And then it usually falls into place to some degree. And if it doesn't, after all of that, ask for help.
yeah.
It's such a big deal. Ask for help. And if you're in a situation where when you ask for help, you get chastised, again, we go back to, is that the kind of place that you want to work for?
You
No.
may be at the wrong place.
Right?
But
So
there's
there's lots of things in there. And it
yeah,
sounds like at the store you're at, not only are you supportive, but you're providing the resources required for everybody to be successful. And that's a secondary portion of leadership. Like, not only are you there to support the questions that they're asking, but actually provide the resources or whatever it happens to be so they can be successful, even if they're having a bad day.
it definitely is because it does happen, and a lot of it's just in totally in your mind. It's like the mind is such a powerful thing. Because even
Mm-hmm.
coming from North Carolina to Florida, so I was at the previous company for 20 years. I was there in the beginning. That's where I started as a technician and worked my way through. And when I was the fixed ops director there, we built a lot of winning teams. We opened up two more stores and a wholesale distribution, a reconditioning center, an accessory shop. So we were growing and we were building teams. And it's crazy how when the suggestion when Bozard called and just asked would it be a possibility to move to Florida, all those thoughts is like, well, did I even make a difference, or was it just timing, or yeah, all this little self doubt stuff would pop in my head. It's like, yeah, you just were lucky to build those winning teams. I don't think you could do it anymore because you're in Florida, no connections, you don't know anybody in Florida. But it's crazy how your mind it's almost like you have to work very hard to control your mind for those thoughts. Because when I came down to Florida, I really didn't think I could do it, to be honest with you, just because of those thoughts. You know, that imposter
Mm-hmm.
syndrome kind of thing. I beat myself
Mm-hmm.
up pretty hard with it, but those self doubts and stuff like that. And that's no matter what you do, you know, technician or whatever. A lot of technicians don't look that they can be a manager, but I feel like with people skills, they can be a very successful manager because they know what the product is. They know the inner pieces of it, so they can explain it a little bit more to customers and service advisors and stuff like that. They know the process of it, and the shop part is a very it has to flow. If the shop don't flow, nothing flows, and they have an
Mm-hmm.
advantage on that side. But to get them to the mindset that they can do it is very important, and you know, and that's why I like sharing my story because it is possible on that.
Awesome, and I appreciate that very much. So I think that's a great way to ask the most important question that got you on here for. What's your one piece of advice for a technician out there to help them be happier, healthier, or more productive, or all three?
So really, it's just invest in yourself. Um, Start with personal growth. There's And what's cool about it is you don't have to spend a dime to do it. Like I was saying early on my stuff, there's YouTube channels. I mean, there's Audible. Audible you got to pay for, but if you don't want to pay for it, there's public libraries that have this book. Because I've checked out a lot of books in there that, you know, at the time, yeah, with a big family of five boys, there wasn't a lot of money to spare. So YouTube every day.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of invest 30 minutes a day in some kind of personal or leadership. And what that is when I wake up in the morning, I listen to something positive and encouragement, leadership training, or just personal growth just to get my mindset. Because it's important now for you to get ready for your next position. That's if I could go back, that's one thing I would have done. Because when I became a manager, I had a learning curve because I didn't know leadership. So I made a lot of crazy mistakes. I did a lot of stupid things. And you learn from experience. But if I'd have had that personal growth knowledge, it would have been faster. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my number one advice. Go ahead and get ready now. Start studying personal growth, leadership. There's a lot of content out there. There's a lot of books behind me. Um, but do the free stuff first. And what's cool about it is once you start listening, I was trying to think the first guy I listened to on YouTube was Jim Rohn.
Oh yeah.
And then through Jim Rohn, I discovered Les Brown, Earl Nightingale, Ed Milet, and it just goes on and on and on. And what's cool is like you have this variety because you got to kind of find your cup of tea. Because I like listening to John Maxwell, but I got a couple friends that don't like John Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to kind of find which one connects with you, and you just got to consume as much as you can.
I think that the cool part of especially listening, especially the authors that voice their own audiobooks, is you get to listen to them. Um, One of the cool things to listen to is the stuff that you don't like. And I got to remember this every time I listen to a book or start reading a book that I don't like, especially when it's about personal development of some description, is that I have to ask myself, why don't I like it? Is it because it's something that I don't want to believe? And it potentially is very true and very impactful and very life changing. And I just don't like what I'm hearing. It's kind of like looking at the mirror, right? Do I just not want to accept the fact and accept accountability for my actions? So I like listening to stuff that I don't like listening to as much as I like the stuff that helps me immediately recognize something that I need to listen to. Because I think learning both sides of that means that you then become acclimatized to the things that you need to learn outside of your bubble.
Um,
You learn perspectives, like you said, the difference between sitting on the sidelines up 16 rows in the stadium, being able to see the entire field versus being on the field and living it. If you have the more perspective that you get, and you can only get that by talking to people, reading, or consuming, the more perspective you had, but the better the decisions are that you make,
no,
right? If you only have one perspective, like your son on the field, they only have one decision to make. But the more they open their opportunities up, the more you open your eyes up to other things, the more opportunities then present themselves.
Yeah. And it's cool how it ripple effects into that. So you start with, because I try to go to a leadership conference once a year, and
Mm-hmm.
I missed one last year because it's awesome too to surround yourself with like-minded people of that
Mm-hmm.
part of it. And then, my wife and I, we have coaches, to help us to that next spot. That's why I like doing one-on-one coaching, because it's like it helps people get to where they want to faster than what all I had to
Mm-hmm.
experience and come through there. So I can work with service managers to get them a little bit closer and a little bit faster. I can sum up my whole 30-year career and coach you, and I can tell you everything I've done wrong because I can remember all the stuff I've done wrong and say, hey, don't touch this, don't do that, don't do this. And it's like, I just let you avoid half the stuff that you're going to experience on your own, and let you slingshot a little bit faster in that.
Mm-hmm. That's why I say journal. Journal something every day. Because guess what? If you got 365 days of losses, that means in 10 years you have 3,650 things that you can teach people not to do.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
I can tell you what, 3,650 things in a book will sell.
Yeah,
You then have something then you can sell. Even if the trade doesn't work out, you can become an author. But you got to write it. You got to write it first. Jeremy, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your energy. I appreciate it very, very, very much.
thank you for having me, and looking forward to our relationship. And let me know if there's anything I can do to help you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Folks, that's the end of another Wrench Turners podcast. Hard to believe that we've got over 150 in the bank, but have a look on Spotify, have a look on YouTube. They are all there, just like Jeremy here. Every single one has a little tidbit for you to learn to get a little bit happier, a little bit healthier, a little bit more productive on the shop floor. And as we always end the show with a quote, I wanted to find something a little bit outside the normal, because we get very cliche in the quotes, and there's a lot of inspiration porn, as it were, that floats around. That it's just feel good stuff. But one of the just a very quick story to cap off here. I'm trying to learn some creative things on how I make content, how I, thumbnails and all that kind of stuff to make YouTube a little bit better and make better content for you guys. And I realized that the more stuff I make, the more complicated it made it, and it didn't look that great, or it didn't come out that great. And I was trying to find, how do I do this better and how to do this better? And then I came across this quote: the best artists know what to leave out. That's Charles DeLint. So remember, folks, you don't necessarily have to add. Sometimes you just need those 5 strong people in your life. Like Jeremy said earlier on, 5 strong people in your life going to help you grow and learn and prosper. Folks, negative pushes, positive pulls, and always clean your toys before you put them away.